Hi everyone, it's Plesky P here from Melbourne, Australia, and I'm with Spencer Drate. How are you today, Spencer? And Happy New Year to all our viewers.
Happy New Year, everybody, and glad to be on Plastic. I'm telling you, this is going to be a good show. We got the author of the book, I Want You Around, the book about the making of rock and roll high school by the author, Stephen B. Armstrong. Stephen, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks, Spencer. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, our pleasure. Hey, to start off, what started you to get the concept of the book inspired you?
Oh, my relationship with the movie Rock and Roll High School goes back to about 1984 or so, when MTV on Sunday nights would screen the film periodically, an expurgated, cleaned up version of the movie with all the drug references cut out. Even in a sort of wounded condition, it was still a very powerful movie for me. It was 1984. I was just getting into music that veers away from the traditional mainstream. I was listening to a lot of Lou Reed, a lot of Blondie, and the Ramones, and the Clash. And this movie just really connected with my 14-year-old head. And I embraced the whole sort of, not simply the punk rock music, but punk rock attitude and anti-establishmentarianism. And that's sort of how it's been for me for the past 40 years or so. Kind of a guy who, cares more about the fun in life, seriousness, purpose, of course, but living to sort of help others and have a great time. And somehow I think that attitude lines up with many of the themes that are exemplified in the movie, especially with the PJ Souls character, Riff Randall, who lives to help others and have fun. And so the movie's always been important to me. Paul Bartel, who plays Mr. McGree in the film, directed a number of movies that also left quite an impression on a young brain. Death Race 2000 and Eating Raoul. And I wrote a book on the director of those movies, Paul Bartel, and wound up getting to know a lot of the people who worked for Roger Corman, the producer of the movie, the executive producer of the film, and people who worked on the movie when we're friends with Paul Bartel, like Joe Dante, and Alan Arkish, the director. So it grew out of other scholarly endeavors that I had pursued. And it's sort of writing about a favorite thing. I've actually found that over the years, I've sort of followed my passions, follow your bliss, as the saying goes. And always what happened is that, writing exhaustively about something, like John Frankenheimer, the director of The Manchurian Candidate, which I did quite a bit of work with, killed my interest in the subject matter. But I think that writing about Rock and Roll High School over the course of 18 months and living with it for nearly 40 years, my affection for the movie is just as strong as it is ever. I truly think it's probably my favorite movie. So you can't kill love when it's true, when it's not just an obsession.
Yeah, you got some amazing stories in the book also. And you also, I designed Road to Ruin album cover with John Holmstrom, and that's mentioned in the book, which was shown in the film. Tell us about some of the stories in the book.
Well, you have this. Well, that's a story right there, and that the Ramones were coming out of a pretty big change in their makeup toward the end of 1978 when the film came out. Tommy had left the band a year earlier. He'd said, "I'm not the drummer anymore. I'm not going to record anymore," but he stayed on as the band's producer. This is one of the founding members of the Ramones, Tommy, and with Ed Stasium produced Road to Ruin, and it was at the spring of '78, and the band was just driving for a hit. They didn't want to be working rock and rollers so much. They wanted their meal ticket stamped for life with a big hit album. So with a set of, I mean, a list of great songs, and again the production shared by Ed Stasium and Tommy Ramone,
Yeah.
Tommy Early, they turned out this polished, beautiful record of power pop, uh, which aligns somewhat with the Archies and somewhat with Black Sabbath, kind of bringing
Mm-hmm.
those two,
Yeah.
that driving force and beautiful melody and pretty good harmonies, and they worked out that record, and the you and John Holmstrom were charged with working up the cover, and there's that good story of John, who listeners may be familiar with the New York City publication Punk that thrived in the 1970s and that
Right.
helped give the name punk to the musical movement.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we see that punk is still, fairly alive and well with what Green Day did the other day by going after Elon Musk on a New Year's Eve event. And
Mm-hmm.
although miles and miles divide Green Day from Ramones in 1978, 79, but you and John, working with fan art, raised this cartoon image of the band on stage to sort of a level of great art. And you may want to tell everybody about how your work wound up in the Museum of Modern Art, and for
Yeah.
that cartoon designed image with the bright yellow word Ramones across the top of the sleeve.
Yeah. The album cover we converted had to be converted into a point of purchase poster, and that was in a very big punk show at the Steve Kasher Gallery in New York. And the Museum of Modern Art came down and they purchased some of those posters, and one of them was that poster, which is in MoMA. Um, it's funny because I told Seymour Stein shortly after it was in MoMA, Steve, I told him, uh, hey, our poster is in the MoMA collection. He was so excited. He replies to me in a message that, Spencer, you were one of the few people who believed in the Ramones. I said, wow. It's like it was a big thing, that thing. But John had a lot to do with it, right? It starts with Gus McDonald doing a sketch of a cartoon, and then it changes, and eventually John does the finished art. And it's the cartoon cover. That's the other thing. Their only cartoon cover, and that makes it very interesting. They're very, for me, they were very. Steve, I don't know if you agree. They were meant in the cartoon world. You know what I'm saying? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they were the type of group that was very obvious to go into like a cartoon form, right?
Yeah. I've seen a cover of a comic too with the Archie kids going to a Ramones concert, and it's done in that Archie style that
Yeah, yeah.
uh yeah. And of course I'm always trying to sort of atone with some of the decisions I've not things beyond my power sometimes, but I found out after I wrote the book that you had done the sleeve design also for the 45 for the single
Right, yeah.
Rock and Roll High School, and I had tried to get that. The book has just gone into second edition, and I had tried to get that emendation in,
Yeah,
and
I
found out
know.
that it's going to go
Yeah,
in with
it's
the
okay.
third edition.
Yeah, and
But
William Stout did the artwork, right? William Stout.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
he's a great artist. I mean, the guy is like unbelievable. He did
yeah.
that.
That drawing of the high school blowing up with
Yeah.
a mouse and kids on motorcycle and Miss Togar, the villain in the story, and of course people aren't exactly sure how to write out the title of the film. Is
Mm,
it with the N that appears in the middle? And that is sort of caused in part by that poster where you see one spelling of Rock and Roll High School with an uppercase N and one spelling with a lowercase n for
mm,
between rock and roll. and I don't even know what the title of the film is ultimately, but yeah. So as for stories, I mean, what I tried to do was to write the book as much like a novel as I could,
Hmm.
and that's my background is actually creative writing, and uh but I also have an orientation towards history, particularly popular culture history, and worked up this story that's based on quite a bit of research in which you have a young filmmaker who named Alan Arkish who trades everything to get to have a have a career as a filmmaker, leaves New York City where he's been driving a cab to go to Los Angeles to Hollywood, in fact, and work for nearly nothing on these movies that Roger Corman was making, and how his make or break moment for that first film came along with the ability to direct Rock and Roll High School. And I also tell the story of how the Ramones were just trying to get more exposure because back in 78, 79, radio was everything.
Yeah,
And if you couldn't
true.
get the radio programmer to play your songs, there was no alternative. There wasn't an internet, and not
Hmm.
an internet that was used for dissemination of popular music. And so they agreed to be in a movie, paid $25,000 as a band, plus some royalties on the backside of it with the release of the soundtrack album. They were really hoping that Rock and Roll High School the song would be a hit,
Yeah.
and that of course is the 45 sleeve that you designed, and it didn't happen for him. The movie failed commercially when it was released in the spring of 79,
Mm.
and it was only sort of revived later in television. Viewers would see it, such as I did on the MTV at 14, and just sort of fall in love with it. They'd see movie versions of it on Showtime and the movie channel as well. And Channel Z, I think, was one of the channels. Uh, and gradually it built up a following that way. And it's now firmly a cult film, just as I guess you would say the Ramones are a cult band because they
Yeah.
never had a hit. And
Yeah. They
so,
were they were struggling in the beginning of their life. At the beginning of their career, they were struggling. I remember hearing stories. What's interesting is Chris Franz writes on the back of your book, and I did not realize that till they were the first group at CBGB's to have a movie, right? That came out of CBGB.
yeah, that's and Richard Hell had the a movie that came out at the same time, around the same time.
Hmm.
I really I wrote this book about a movie that is an exemplar of punk cinema, but I don't claim to be an expert on punk movies. Most
Right.
of them are really off-putting for me, but but yeah, the it's still with us. It's still around.
Stephen, I just want to
Yeah.
congratulate you on the book, right? And I want you to know here in
Thank you.
Australia, there's so many Ramon fans out there
All right.
that
Yes.
have
Yeah.
that have bought your book. And this movie is a cult classic, and it's just growing from strength to strength with generation to generation. It isn't amazing, though, that some of these great bands, when they start, they've got a shaky start, but with time, they just get stronger and stronger with merchandise, with their following, and with the newer fans. Do you agree?
I think so. I have a daughter just turned 10 years old yesterday. She's quite familiar with the Ramones. We had a
Mm.
framed poster
Wow.
of the original four in our garage for a couple of years. I moved it to another room, but she can tell you the names of several songs. She can sing along to certain songs. There's just something about this music from now quite long ago. I mean, it's been since 96 since they broke up, and she just loves it. It's just sort of I guess it's the combination of the drive and the Joey has the very strange voice, but it's at the same time very emotive and just and they're fun songs to sing along to.
Hmm.
And she gets it. So it does seem like the Ramones have that future ahead of them that a lot of bands that have sort of been critically embraced but didn't have a bunch of hits most bands, I guess, or most bands don't have hits, but that they're a part of the musical landscape the way maybe Mozart is. It's not going away.
Yeah.
And their appeal, I think, is sort of there's something visceral about that music. It gets into your guts and it gets into your heart and it gets into your brain too. They were smart guys. Most of them were, as far as I can tell. But there's something about the Ramones that they just got it right. I don't know if every Ramones song is worthy, but boy, those first five albums and the two that have the covers that Spencer worked on, those are, the End of the Century and Road to Ruin. Those are two of the
Yeah.
best records I've ever heard in my life, and I've listened to a
Right.
lot of records.
Yeah, the End of the Century is interesting because they're dressed. Mick Rock did that famous front cover shot, and they're dressed in the colored T-shirts. And the story was that the label Sire wanted to get them more commercial. That's the reason that cover is so different than the normal Ramones cover, And I know it's a gorgeous photograph. I mean, it's a really great shot of them, in another mode, you might say. But that was a really great album. Phil Spector produced it, right? The Wall of Sound and that
Yeah.
whole thing.
Yeah, and they had that second version of Rock and Roll High School on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Different, and they had Wrecking Crew, Wall of Sound
Mm-hmm.
musicians working on that, and those first five albums, the Sire records in general, are just fabulous, fabulous.
Yeah.
What may I turn the table and ask why do Australians like a four-piece revved up hard rocking band with pretty sound from the Lower East Side? What is it that's working about the Ramones and so far away?
Well, I got to
I want.
explain to you, right? The CBGB club, right? That's where they reckon punk started, like Blondie, and everyone came out from there. And that's like iconic to
Right.
the Australians because the Australians are behind the eight ball, right? We're like 6 months away from what's actually happening overseas. And by the time we pick it up and know what's going, pre internet, everything used to be through the press, through either TV or the media, the magazines. But it was always behind the eight ball until the internet came into it. But when you think of punk, you straight away think of CBGB, you think of Blondie, you think of the Ramones, you think of the bands that stood out, and that's what's reflected on Australian culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish I knew a bit more about Australian rock and roll and punk rock. I mean, I remember how big Midnight Oil were and NXS, and then the it's the Saints, right? Isn't that the
Yeah,
Australian
that's
band?
right. The
Yeah,
Saints, the Saints did were like the origin of punk. But I got to say, if you go back and you look at the singles that were released that were punk, we were still a little bit behind the eight ball because that's just how it is here. Our genres of music come as we come. I mean, I can tell you, to me, the most famous band, AC/DC, is number one. There's no question.
Yeah.
But the
Right.
band to me is the Angels. And you need to go and listen to the Angels, right? Because they opened up and supported AC/DC and were with the same production company, Alberts, but they left. If you listen to their sound and you listen to their songs, to me, there's no greater songwriters.
Yeah.
I just read the other day that Iggy Pop had been considered to be the replacement for Bon Scott at one point, and Iggy
Wow.
said,
Yeah.
"I don't think that they understood where I was coming from," and would have been an interesting combination.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
also like to ask you, Stephen, if you can tell everyone where they can buy the book. I know it's here now with the Australian biggest distributors, but just tell everyone where they can actually purchase the book now. You're in your second run, that's correct?
Yeah.
yeah. So, and I just got my new copies, the second edition, and thank you. They the Amazon and Barnes and Noble are the two international platforms for picking up the book, but also the warehouse now is full of copies, and I'm hoping that will mean that indie bookstores will start being able to carry copies. And but again, the snap answer is Amazon. And it hurts me to say that because it sort of seems it seems establishmentarian. It's anti-punk to say, oh, go to Amazon. But what else can you do?
Yeah, I have a lot of my books on Amazon still. Judith and I have done like 21 books, and most of them are on it. It's really great, actually. But I just want to say also that for people to know that the Ramones were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was very big, right? So they built up their whole life. I think when you study the profile of Ramones, the biggest thing is they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the movie that you're writing about. I mean, that movie is a big part of their profile.
Yeah, it is. And I know that the director, Alan Arkish, that's another one of the stories right there. He'd heard the first record, the one that it just sort of, if you know the Ramones, you know that one. Today you love, tomorrow the world, it ends the record. And then he didn't like Leave Home, but when he heard Rocket to Russia, which also features a John Holmstrom cover, although it's the back cover, he just said, boy, this is the music that I really like. And he had been a guy who had done lighting for Grateful Dead and John and Yoko and the Beach Boys at the Fillmore East in Lower Manhattan, in the Lower East Side, and knew a thing or two about good music. And when it was proposed to him by Warner Brothers, what about having the Ramones in your movie? He said, well, I'm going to have to go see them. And he went up to an uptown club in Manhattan called Hurrah on the Upper West Side, which was not far from Seymour Stein's offices, the Sire office, townhouse, whatever it was, and saw this band, was floored, realized that he was somehow, it's the weird thing of the Ramones, especially perhaps the earlier Ramones, but Adios Amigos has great songs on it too. But what you have is the high and the low sort of paired, smashed up together at the same time. And he recognized that.
Stephen, I'd just like to thank you so much on behalf of myself and Spencer for being on the interview. But we thank you so much, and we want everyone to go out and buy their book. I Want You Around. Make sure you buy it. It's fantastic. Spencer?
Yeah, I want to also add that the book is on Backbeat Books, right, Stephen?
Yeah, that's the publisher.